What we're calling for today is for the providers of commercial online pornography to look at accelerating the pace at which they introduce age verification measures. Those measures are being put in place through the online safety bill. But here at Barnado's and across the sector, we recognise that legislation can take a long time to implement, and it's really important that for every day that those age verification measures aren't in place, we recognise some of the risks of exposure to online pornography that affect children and young people.
So what kind of an impact can it have on children and young people if they come across this sort of content?
Well, we know that children and young people tell us that this content can really impact their mental health and well-being. And they also tell us that it really influences their perception of healthy relationships. There are other risks that young people are exposed to as a result of that. And that can include things like participating in acts that they might have seen through pornographic content that actually, result in them being quite scared and often feeling quite vulnerable. We also know that it blurs boundaries for young people in terms of a sense of what constitutes a healthy relationship, and can create a sense of pressure for them at a period of development that is really quite critical in adolescence.
Okay, so how would an age verification process ideally work then in practice? How would it, tell us a little bit more about how it would actually work.
There are age verification measures in place at the moment for a number of tech and online areas of service. So, for example, in gambling, there are age verification measures. There are steps that are taken to verify that somebody is at an age at which legally they can engage in gambling activity, and the technology exists for that. Technology is improving all of the time, and in an area that's about protecting children from potential harm, we think it's absolutely critical that some of those measures are taken and brought to bear in this area of commercial online pornography.
Okay, and for people who haven't come across these kind of measures before, like you say on gambling sites, how does the process actually work? How do they ensure that people are the age that they say they are?
Well, I think there are a number of checks that can be undertaken, and some of that I'm sure requires verification in terms of documentary evidence or cross-referencing of information that's shared. But what we also know is that for children and young people, those steps actually might be sufficient to prevent young people being able to take a further step of access. And what we know is that often young people are stumbling across this content. Children and young people should never be a couple of steps away from potentially harmful content online. Introducing those measures actually would mean that young people would be far less likely to stumble across content inadvertently. And if they were seeking it, there would be some measures in place to certainly minimise the likelihood of access.
Okay, and as you say, it will be a little bit of time before these measures are made compulsory. How likely is it, do you think, that the people who run these kind of sites will want to answer your calls and bring it in voluntarily beforehand?
Well, we know that because of the passage of time with the bill, some of those companies will already have been looking at what the art of the possible is in terms of the technical capabilities that they would need to introduce age verification measures. And so some of them we think are probably in a state of preparedness to implement much earlier than just through the timetable that would evolve through the legislative process. What that indicates, I think, is that there is a readiness to respond. And what we'd like to see is an acceleration of pace on that. So for those companies that are ready, we would hope that they would take these steps now to act in an early and proactive way to protect children. And for those that aren't, there is an opportunity here to learn from others and to look across and to take action. Given that this is going to become a legal requirement, what we would hope actually is that people would use the opportunity now in order to make those changes. And as I said, constantly we've got an evolution in technology and our ability, our technical capabilities. And over the period of the next 2 to 3 years, I'm sure that will iterate as well.